Welcome back to Paranightmares, where the night whispers and we listen. If creepy tales and unsettling shadows are your kind of lullaby, you're in the right place. Before we descend into tonight's darkness, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're from and what time you're watching. After you finish the video, let us know which part made your skin crawl most. I'm watching, and I read everyone. The first day back from a 2-week business trip was supposed to be relaxing, not terrifying. Sophie unlocked her apartment door in the heart of New York City. She carried only a light suitcase and a worn tote bag containing toiletries, bought cheaply at JFK Airport due to dwindling funds after the stock market downturn she'd invested foolishly in earlier that year. The apartment was small but comfortable, overlooking a bustling city street from an old building near the edge of Chinatown. Inside, the smell hit her first, stale antiseptic and dust. Something had disturbed the air circulation during her absence. Then came the sound. Faint at first, the rhythmic dripping of water directly above her head in the bathroom, ceiling she hadn't used since moving here 18 months ago. She ignored it initially, thinking maybe a pipe was leaking near the roof. New York winters were harsh, and heat systems left unused could be prone to issues. Packing down from exhaustion took precedence over investigating minor inconveniences. Clothes went into the closet drawer, books onto shelves, her laptop unboxed gently, groceries placed in the fridge, cold cuts and milk for tonight's simple dinner. Checking her bank balance via phone, the negative numbers stared back at her with alarming clarity. The trip hadn't gone as well financially as she'd hoped. As evening fell outside, casting long shadows into the dimly lit apartment, Sophie settled onto the sofa in the small living room. A comfortable space, but not much larger than a shoebox, feeling weary and defeated. The dripping sound continued its steady rhythm from upstairs. Was it coming through the floor? No, it sounded more like it was directly overhead. She felt foolish for dwelling on something so minor, especially with financial stress hanging heavy in the air. But then another sound joined it. Faint scratching noises, metallic against the dripping water. It seemed to be moving closer towards her ceiling, or perhaps the walls. Sophie got up and walked cautiously into the bathroom. The light revealed a small puddle on the tile floor near the drain. A pipe running above was damp, but not leaking visibly at that moment. The scratching intensified as she approached, becoming audible even through the thin ceiling plaster. It sounded like tiny claws or pebbles being dragged against metal piping. She pressed her ear to the cold, tiled wall between the sink and the mirror. A low scraping sound emanated from there too, accompanied by a faint, rhythmic tap drip. It was unsettling, unsettlingly mundane sounding, yet deeply disturbing. She went back into the living room, trying to ignore it now, but she couldn't stop thinking about that scratching. Was it real? Or was her mind playing tricks because of stress and lack of sleep? Dinner settled, cold cuts on crackers, the cheapest wine available at Whole Foods from a previous visit during better times financially. She finished quickly, staring absently out the window as streetlights flickered outside. The scratching returned, louder now, directly from a wall opposite her bookshelf. She grabbed an old wooden chair and carried it into the living room, positioning it right against the wall where the sounds originated. Then she waited. Minutes stretched into an agonizing hour. The scratching continued, a dry, grating sound that seemed to echo through every corner of the small apartment. The dripping stopped for a few moments, replaced by a faint hissing noise from somewhere else in the building system. Or was it just coincidence? Sophie felt her heart pounding. This wasn't normal wear and tear or faulty pipes. She decided to investigate systematically. First, recheck the bathroom ceiling. No visible leaks now. Second, inspect under sinks. Nothing there. Third, check the floor drain in the living room. Clean, covered with a simple metal grating that clicked softly when touched by her worn knee. Against this grating, she placed her ear again. The scratching intensified dramatically from inside it. She could hear faint whispers now too, overlapping with the scraping sound. Look up, always look up. Fear gripped her. Was there someone living in a crawl space under the apartment? but the noise sounded closer to metalwork being manipulated than human scratching. Suddenly, the wall behind the chair pulled, or rather, something slid out from within it. It was heavy and made a grinding sound against the floorboards as whatever it was dragged itself across the living room's thin wooden flooring. Sophie screamed, stumbling back into her modest kitchenette instead of hitting the wall. Through sheer panic-induced focus, she managed to lock herself in the kitchen and call emergency services from there. The phone connection crackled with static before connecting successfully. While waiting for the dispatcher, while listening to faint scraping noises against the phone receiver's metal casing. Yes, they seemed to follow her even into the communication channel. "Don't trust the police," she thought it might be saying. The help arrived in 30 minutes. 3 uniformed officers entered cautiously. Sophie explained numbly what was happening. They took readings from various points. Electromagnetic fields were normal. Sound waves confirmed scraping and scratching sounds, but acoustic dampening materials showed no signs of disturbance. Structural integrity scans revealed minimal movement within walls, probably settling or minor renovations by neighbors she didn't know existed. All standard results for an old apartment building in a high-density area like NYC. But there was more to the story than physical evidence could explain. The scraping sound from behind her against the phone receiver. They dismissed it as faulty wiring humming sympathetically with city infrastructure during peak hours? Maybe. Sophie remained pale and trembling. The sounds continued after their visit, subsiding only slightly when she didn't listen intently enough. A sense of dread settled in permanently. Could these officers be part of the phenomenon too? The apartment felt different now, colder, even though central heating was on, louder, with phantom echoes constantly present between walls. She tried sleeping again tonight, but couldn't without hearing faint scratching or feeling watched from nearby rooms. The metal chair against the wall didn't help. It scratched rhythmically in response to her breathing pattern. Moving out became a priority. It took weeks, more than she ever expected for something so small to become impossible. She found a new place further uptown, in a newer building with supposedly modern soundproofing. She moved in late one afternoon, weary and exhausted. The first thing she noticed was the silence. But it wasn't peaceful silence. It felt heavy, the kind of quiet that precedes something awful. As soon as her back was turned to lock the door, 30 seconds or less, that precise window, a faint scratching sound began from outside her apartment, coming through an unknown gap in the newer building structure. It stopped when she locked the door properly this time, but now it had a new pattern, appearing only if certain light frequencies were present inside. She spent months trying to identify the trigger. Curtains moved differently by sunlight? No. Computer screens reflecting off something outside during day shifts? No direct link established, yet as of her 6th month in the new place. Sophie still lives there, sometimes hearing faint scratching when she forgets to check for certain wavelengths or frequencies entering through windows and vents. She's paranoid about being watched even by people who know her. It started with an apartment stalker. The August humidity draped Mobile, Alabama, like a sodden shroud. The air thick with the cloying scent of magnolias, their petals wilting on the pavement, and a faint, musty odor, like damp wood rotting in forgotten corners. My house on Dauphin Street. A crumbling Victorian with peeling paint and warped shutters stood alone in the dusk, its gabled roof sagging under the weight of years, its windows reflecting the bay's briny glow. The street was silent, save for the occasional hum of cicadas, their song sharp and relentless, like a warning. I am a Tate, 29, a freelance writer with ink-stained fingers and a faltering career, was home alone for the weekend, my roommate Sophie, away on a work trip to Montgomery. My life was unraveling, behind on deadlines, dodging calls from my editor, Margaret, after plagiarizing an article on Gulf Coast folklore, a desperate act to meet a deadline that cost me her trust and nearly my job. My apartment was a mess of scattered notebooks, half-finished drafts, and coffee mugs crusted with grounds, each a testament to my failure. Reddit's or /nosleep had threads about mobile homes, where doors swung open unprompted, shadows slithered like oil, and whispers named your sins in the dark. My sister, Clara, a pragmatic nurse, had warned against staying alone, citing my recurring nightmares, waking at 3:33 a.m., hearing creaks like splintering bones, and my name hissed in the stillness. I needed to finish a new article to salvage my reputation, but this house, with its creaking joints and sagging floors, held something that knew my theft. Inside, the living room was a dim cave, lit by a single brass lamp that flickered like a dying star, casting jagged shadows across the faded floral wallpaper. The air was heavy, almost syrupy, with that musty scent now laced with a sour tang, like mildew blooming in hidden cracks. The front door, solid oak with a brass knob tarnished green, was locked tight, its bolts rusted but secure. I checked them twice, a habit born of paranoia after reading those Reddit posts. My desk, cluttered with pens and crumpled drafts, faced the door, its grain etched with faint scratches, like claw marks from some forgotten tenant. I sat, my laptop humming, trying to write about Mobile's haunted history, but my fingers froze, the words stalling. At 3:33 a.m., a low creak split the silence, sharp as a snapped bone, echoing from a hallway. The front door stood ajar, a sliver of night air seeping through, cold and wrong for the humid summer, carrying a faint whiff of brackish water from the bay. I stumbled to it, my bare feet sticking to the warped floorboards, and checked the lock bolted. Yet the door yawned wider, its hinges groaning like a wounded animal. My hands shook, and as I touched the knob, a sting shot through my fingers, leaving faint, splinter-like scars across my palms, their patterns mimicking the door's grain, as if the wood had branded me. A whisper, low and in my own voice, slithered from the doorway. "Emma, you stole." My heart hammered, my breath shallow in the thickening air. I slammed the door shut, the sound reverberating, but it creaked open again, the gap wider, shadows pooling inside like spilled ink, forming vague shapes. Hands, eyes, my face, distorted and accusing. I called out for Sophie, though I knew she was gone, my voice swallowed by the house's silence. The air grew colder, the musty scent now choking, like wet earth in a grave. My notebook, left on the desk, was open to a page I hadn't touched, scrawled in my handwriting. "The door knows your lies." My pulse surged. I grabbed my phone to call Clara, but it showed no signal, its screen flickering with a photo I didn't take. Me standing at the door, my face warped, eyes hollow, the background a void of twisting shadows. The house seemed to breathe, the walls creaking in rhythm with my heartbeat, the door swinging wider, revealing a hallway that stretched impossibly long, its end lost in darkness. I tried to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor, splinter-like scars spreading up my wrists, burning with each creak. Reddit's or /nosleep had a post titled "Mobile Haunted Doors" by Creekwatcher, describing a Dauphin Street house where doors open to trap liars, their hinges whispering crimes, the house swallowing those who lingered. "The house keeps it fed," they wrote. Their account deleted hours later. A local blog, buried in Mobile's archives, mentioned a 1920s carpenter, Elias Tate, no relation, I prayed. Who? Betrayed by a thief who stole his designs, cursed his final house's doors to trap deceivers, their sins carved into the wood. The scars on my arms pulsed, now forming words. Plagiarist. My phone flashed more photos, me, splintering into the door, my body fracturing like wood. Desperate, I emailed Dr. Amos Reed, a mobile historian I'd interviewed for my article, attaching photos of my scars. His reply came within minutes, urgent. "Meet me at the Azalea Cafe now." I drove through the fog, the city's lights blurred, my hand stinging as the scars spread. At the cafe, Amos, a wiry man with graying hair, looked grim, his eyes scanning my arms. "Those are door marks," he said, voice low. "Elias Tate bound a spirit to his house's doors after a thief ruined him. It targets liars, trapping them in the wood." He showed me a 1925 journal from Mobile's archives. Residents vanishing, their skin scarred with grain-like marks, doors creaking their names. "You must destroy the main door's knob. It's the heart," he urged, his hands trembling. I returned at dusk, the house looming, its windows black. At 3:33 a.m., the door swung wide, the creaks deafening, the air thick with rot, now mixed with a sickly sweet scent, like decaying magnolias. Shadows writhed in the doorway, forming my editor's face, her eyes accusing. I pried at the knob with a crowbar, my scars burning, the wood splintering to reveal a core of pulsing, writhing fibers, like veins in a living thing. A voice not mine roared, "Emma, confess." The house shook, walls cracking, the floor buckling. I smashed the knob, the fiber screaming, and fled as the house dissolved into a fog that smelled of brine and rot. In a motel, the scars faded, but my keys creaked in my bag, and my reflection whispered my name, its eyes hollow. The September heat pressed Savannah, Georgia, like a heavy palm, the air thick with the scent of marsh grass, damp moss clinging to ancient oaks, and a faint, glassy tang, like windows polished to a sinister sheen. My house on Bull Street, a narrow townhouse with warped shutters and ivy strangling its bricks, stood silent, its windows glinting under the moon's pale gaze. The street hummed with distant cicadas, their song jagged, like a warning in the humid night. I, Lucas Reed, 30, a graphic designer with a faltering portfolio, was home alone for a week, my partner, Mia, on a business trip to Atlanta. My career was crumbling after I copied a client's designs, passing them off as mine, losing contracts and the respect of my peers. My apartment was a chaos of sketch pads, spilled ink, and unpaid bills, each a reminder of my failure. Redditzer/Nosleep had threads about Savannah homes, where windows reflected wrong faces, shadows twisted into accusing shapes, and whispers named your guilt in the glass. My brother, Nate, a skeptical engineer, had warned against staying alone, citing my nightmares, waking at 2:22 a.m., seeing eyes in the glass, not mine, staring back. I needed to finish a new design to salvage my reputation, but this house, with its creaking beams and shadowed corners, held something that saw my theft. The living room was a dim hollow, lit by a flickering bulb that cast uneven shadows across the peeling wallpaper. Its floral pattern faded to gray. The air was heavy, almost viscous, with that glassy scent, now laced with a metallic bite, like rusted window frames. The tall windows, smudged with years of grime, were locked tight, their latches cold under my fingers. I checked them thrice, spooked by those Reddit posts. My desk, cluttered with pencils and half-finished sketches, faced the front window, its panes etched with faint scratches, like eyes scratched into glass. I worked, my tablet glowing, but at 2:22 a.m., a sharp tap echoed from the glass, like fingers rapping on a mirror. The window showed my reflection, but its eyes were wrong, too wide, clouded, accusing, like my client's glare when she discovered my theft. I checked the latch secure, yet the tapping grew, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. My hand stung as I touched the glass, marked with faint, glass-like cuts, their edges jagged, mimicking cracked panes. A whisper in my own voice slithered from the window. "Lucas, you took." My pulse surged, my breath catching. I yanked the curtains shut, their fabric heavy with dust, but they parted, the windows stretching wider, reflections twisting into my client's face, her eyes boring into mine. My phone died, its screen flashing a photo I didn't take. Me at the window, my face melting into glass, my body fracturing into shards. I called for Mia, knowing she was gone, my voice swallowed by the house's silence. The air grew colder, the glassy scent choking, now mixed with a sour reek, like stagnant marsh water. My sketchpad was open, a drawing in my style, but not my hand. Me trapped in glass, eyes staring, mouth open in a silent scream. On Redditzer/Nosleep, a post titled "Savannah Window Ghosts" by Glass Gazer described a Bull Street house where windows trapped liars, their reflections showing crimes. The house swallowing those who lingered. The house watches, they wrote, their account deleted. A Savannah blog mentioned a 1930s glazier, betrayed by a thief who stole his craft, who cursed his last house's windows to trap deceivers, their sins etched into the panes. The cuts on my arms pulsed, forming words. Thief. My phone flashed more photos, me, dissolving into glass, my body splintering like a shattered mirror. The house seemed to breathe, the walls creaking, the windows rattling like teeth. I emailed Dr. Clara Holt, a Savannah historian I'd met at a gallery, attaching photos of my cuts. Her reply was urgent. Meet me at Clary's Cafe now. I drove through the mist, Savannah's oaks looming like sentinels, my hands burning as the cuts spread. At the cafe, Clara, wiry woman with sharp eyes, looked pale, studying my arms. Those are window marks, she said, voice low. The glazier, Amos Reed, bound a spirit to his house's windows after a thief ruined him. It targets deceivers, trapping them in glass. She showed a 1935 journal from Savannah's archives. Residents vanishing, their skin cut with glass-like scars, windows reflecting their faces. You must break the main window's pane, she urged, her hand shaking. I returned at dusk, the house looming, its windows black as eyes. At 2:22 a.m., the windows rattled, the taps deafening, the air thick with marsh rot and glass. Shadows writhed in the panes, forming my client's face, her voice accusing. I swung a hammer at the front window, my scars searing, the glass shattering to reveal a core of pulsing reflections, like liquid mirrors. A voice not mine roared, Lucas, confess. The house shook, walls cracking, the floor buckling. I fled as the house dissolved into a fog that smelled of marsh and metal. In Nate's apartment, the cuts faded, but my mirror reflected clouded eyes, and my reflection tapped faintly, its lips moving with my name. The November fog smothered Asheville, North Carolina, the Blue Ridge Mountains looming like silent judges, their peaks shrouded in mist. My house on Haywood Street, a narrow craftsman with sagging floors and peeling paint, stood silent, its windows fogged under the mountain's shadow. The air was heavy with the scent of wet pine, dripping needles, and a faint, coppery reek, like blood seeping through plaster in a forgotten wound. I, Ava Morse, 31, a bookstore clerk with ink-smudged fingers, was home alone for a week, my parents on a cruise to the Bahamas. My job was teetering after I sold rare books under the table, pocketing cash to cover rent, betraying my boss's trust. My apartment was a clutter of dog-eared novels, unpaid bills, and coffee stains, each a mark of my failure. Redditzer/Nosleep had threads about Asheville homes, where walls oozed dark liquid, whispers named your lies, and shadows pulsed like veins. My friend Lila, a librarian, had warned against staying alone, citing my nightmares, waking at 4:44 a.m., hearing drips and my name echoing in the walls. I needed to sort my life, but this house, with its groaning beams and damp corners, held something that bled my deceit. The living room was a dim hollow, lit by a flickering lamp that cast uneven shadows across the cracked wallpaper, its pattern of vines twisting like arteries. The air was thick, almost choking, with that coppery scent, now laced with a sour tang, like rancid meat. The walls, faded and peeling, seemed to pulse faintly, their cracks glistening in the lamplight. I checked the windows, locked, their frames cold and slick with condensation. My desk, piled with books and receipts, faced the main wall, its surface etched with faint scratches, like words half-formed. I worked, sorting invoices, but at 4:44 a.m., a slow drip echoed from the hallway, like blood pooling in a wound. The living room wall oozed a dark, viscous liquid, its surface rippling, forming words in jagged script. Ava, you stole. I stumbled to it, my socks damp on the cold floor, and touched the wall, its surface warm, pulsing. My hand stung, marked with faint, vein-like burns, their patterns mimicking the oozing cracks, as if the house had branded me. A whisper in my own voice slithered from the plaster. "Ava, confess." My pulse surged, my breath shallow. I scrubbed the wall with a rag, but the liquid spread, forming my boss's face, her eyes accusing, her mouth dripping red. My phone died, its screen flashing a photo I didn't take. Me against the wall, my skin oozing blood, my body dissolving into the plaster. I called for Lila, knowing she was gone, my voice swallowed by the house's silence. The air grew colder, the coppery scent choking, now mixed with the sickly sweet reek, like decaying pine. My journal was open, a page scrawled with my thefts in my handwriting. Rare books sold $200. On Reddit/Nosleep, a post titled "Asheville Bleeding Walls" by Bloodscribe described a Haywood Street house where walls bled secrets, trapping liars in their plaster. The house feeds it. They wrote, their account deleted. An Asheville blog mentioned a 1940s painter, betrayed by a thief who stole his art, who cursed his last house's walls to trap deceivers, their sins oozing through the cracks. The burns on my arms pulsed, forming words. Thief. My phone flashed more photos, me, melting into the wall, my body fracturing like plaster. The house seemed to breathe, the floors creaking, the walls dripping in rhythm with my heartbeat. I emailed Dr. Nora Klein, an Asheville historian I'd met at the bookstore, attaching photos of my burns. Her reply was urgent. "Meet me at Bean and Leaf Cafe now." I drove through the fog, the mountains looming, my hands searing as the burn spread. At the cafe, Nora, a stern woman with gray eyes, looked grim, studying my arms. "Those are wall marks," she said, voice low. "The painter, Elias Morse, bound a spirit to his house's walls after a thief ruined him. It targets deceivers, trapping them in plaster." She showed a 1945 journal from Asheville's archives. Residents vanishing, their skin burned with vein-like marks, walls oozing their names. "You must paint over the main wall's crack," she urged, her hands trembling. I returned at dusk, the house looming, its windows black. At 4:44 a.m., the walls dripped, the sound deafening, the air thick with blood and pine rot. Shadows writhed in the plaster, forming my boss's face, her voice accusing. I painted the main wall with trembling hands, my burn searing, the plaster cracking to reveal a core of pulsing veins, like a heart in the house. A voice not mine roared, "Ava, confess." The house shook, floors buckling, walls splintering. I fled as the house dissolved into a fog that smelled of blood and decay. In a motel, the burns faded, but my paintbrush dripped red, and my reflection oozed blood, its lips moving with my name. The September heat clung to Chattanooga, Tennessee, like a damp cloak, the air thick with the scent of river mud, its earthy tang rising from the Tennessee River, and a faint, dusty reek, like old wood crumbling in forgotten attics. My house on Signal Mountain Road, a two-story colonial with creaking floors and chipped paint, stood silent under the looming ridge, its shadow stretching across the lawn like a warning. The street was quiet, save for the distant drone of crickets, their chirps sharp and uneven, like a code. I, Tyler Voss, 32, a mechanic with grease-stained hands, was home alone for a week, my wife, Ellie, on a work trip to Nashville. My auto shop was failing after I overcharged clients, inflating bills to cover debts, losing their trust and my reputation. My garage was a mess of tools, unpaid invoices, and oil stains, each a mark of my greed. Reddit/Nosleep had threads about Chattanooga homes, where stairs led to impossible voids, whispers named your greed, and shadows twisted into accusing shapes. My brother, Jake, a gruff contractor, had warned against staying alone, citing my nightmares. Waking at 5:55 a.m., hearing creaks and footsteps descending into darkness. I needed to fix my books, but this house, with its sagging beams and shadowed corners, held something that knew my scams. The hallway was a dim corridor, lit by a single bulb that flickered like a failing pulse, casting jagged shadows across the faded wallpaper, its pattern of leaves curling like claws. The air was heavy, almost gritty, with that dusty scent, now laced with a sour tang, like rotting wood. The staircase, oak with worn steps, groaned faintly, its banister etched with faint scratches, like tally marks of past tenants. I checked the locks, secure, my paranoia fueled by those Reddit posts. My office, cluttered with ledgers and wrenches, faced the stairs, their steps disappearing into shadow. I worked, balancing accounts, but at 5:55 a.m., a sharp creak echoed, like footsteps descending endlessly. The staircase stretched downward beyond the basement into a black void, cold and wrong for the humid night. I checked the basement door, locked, yet the stairs continued, their steps pulsing. My hand stung, marked with faint, step-like bruises, their patterns mimicking the tread marks, as if the stairs had pressed into me. A whisper in my own voice slithered from the void. "Tyler, you cheated." My pulse surged, my breath catching. I climbed down, but the stairs looped, leading nowhere, shadows forming my clients' faces, their eyes accusing. My phone died, its screen flashing a photo I didn't take. Me on the stairs, my body fading into the dark, my face twisted with guilt. I called for Ellie, knowing she was gone, my voice swallowed by the house's silence. The air grew colder, the dusty scent choking, now mixed with a wet reek, like river mud. My ledger was open, entries scrawled with my overcharges in my handwriting. $500 inflated. On Reddit's /Nosleep, a post titled "Chattanooga Staircase Void" by Stepwraith described a Signal Mountain house where stairs trapped cheaters, their steps whispering greed, the house swallowing those who lingered. The house pulls them. They wrote, their account deleted. A Chattanooga blog mentioned a 1950s builder, betrayed by a scammer who stole his plans, who cursed his last house's stairs to trap the greedy, their sins carved into the wood. The bruises on my arms pulsed, forming words, cheater. My phone flashed more photos, me, falling into the void, my body splintering like wood. The house seemed to breathe, the walls creaking, the stairs groaning in rhythm with my heartbeat. I emailed Dr. Lila Thorne, a Chattanooga historian I'd met at a car show, attaching photos of my bruises. Her reply was urgent. "Meet me at Riverfront Diner now." I drove through the fog, the ridge looming, my hands searing as the bruises spread. At the diner, Lila, a stern woman with sharp eyes, looked grim, studying my arms. "Those are stair marks," she said, voice low. The builder Amos Voss bound a spirit to his house's stairs after a scammer ruined him. It targets cheaters, trapping them in the void. She showed a 1955 journal from Chattanooga's archives. Residents vanishing, their skin bruised with step-like marks, stairs leading nowhere. "You must destroy the main step's tread," she urged, her hands trembling. I returned at dusk, the house looming, its windows black. At 5:55 a.m., the stairs creaked, the sound deafening, the air thick with mud and rot. Shadows writhed in the void, forming my clients' faces, their voices accusing. I pried up the top step with a crowbar, my bruises searing, the wood splintering to reveal a core of pulsing roots, like veins in a living thing. A voice not mine roared, "Tyler, confess." The house shook, floors buckling, walls cracking. I fled as the house dissolved into a fog that smelled of river mud and decay. In Jake's garage, the bruises faded, but my boots creaked on the floor, and my reflection stepped downward, its eyes accusing. The October chill gripped Charleston, West Virginia, like a cold hand, the air sharp with the scent of the Kanawha River, its muddy tang rising, and a faint, electric hum, like wires sparking in a storm. My house on Virginia Street, a brick bungalow with sagging shutters and cracked windows, stood silent under the city's sodium glow, its shadow pooling like oil. The street was quiet, save for the distant wail of a train, its horn sharp and mournful. I, Nora Holt, 30, a nurse with calloused hands, was home alone for a weekend, my roommate, Lila, on a hiking trip in the Appalachians. My career was teetering after falsifying patient charts to cover a mistake, nearly harming a child, costing me my colleagues' trust. My home was a mess of medical journals, crumpled scrubs, and unpaid bills, each a mark of my failure. Redditzer/Nosleep had threads about Charleston homes, where lights flickered unnaturally, whispering your lies, and shadows burned like embers. My mother, Ellen, retired nurse, had warned against staying alone, citing my nightmares, waking at 6 hours 66 minutes a.m., seeing lights pulse and my name glowing in the dark. I needed to clear my head, but this house, with its creaking floors and dim corners, held something that burned my deceit. The living room was a dim cave, lit by a single ceiling bulb that flickered like a failing heart, casting jagged shadows across the faded wallpaper, its pattern of stripes twisting like wires. The air was heavy, almost crackling, with that electric scent, now laced with a burnt tang, like scorched metal. The bulb, old and dusty, seemed to hum faintly, its glass etched with faint cracks, like veins. I checked the switches, off, my paranoia fueled by those Reddit posts. My laptop, cluttered with patient records, sat on a table facing the light, its glow reflecting my guilt. I worked, reviewing charts, but at 6 hours 66 minutes a.m., the bulb flared, brighter than possible, humming my name in a low buzz. The light burned my eyes, projecting my falsified charts onto the walls, their numbers accusing. I flipped the switch, off, yet the light glowed hotter. My hand stung, marked with faint, spark-like burns, their patterns mimicking electric shocks, as if the bulb had branded me. A whisper in my own voice slithered from the light. "Nora, you lied." My pulse surged, my breath shallow. The lights flared, shadows forming my patient's face, a child's eyes accusing. My phone died, its screen flashing a photo I didn't take. Me under the light, my skin burning, my body melting into sparks. I called for Lila, knowing she was gone, my voice swallowed by the house's silence. The air grew colder, the electric scent choking, now mixed with a sour reek, like burnt wiring. My notebook was open, scrawled with my falsified charts and my handwriting. Dosage altered, 10 milligrams. On Redditzer/Nosleep, a post titled "Charleston Burning Lights" by Spark Ghost described a Virginia Street house where lights burned liars, their glow trapping them in sparks. "The house powers it," they wrote, their account deleted. A Charleston blog mentioned a 1960s electrician, betrayed by a fraud who stole his work, who cursed his last house's lights to trap deceivers, their sins glowing in the bulbs. The burns on my arms pulsed, forming words, liar. My phone flashed more photos, me, melting under light, my body fracturing like wires. The house seemed to breathe, the walls crackling, the lights buzzing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I emailed Dr. Elias Kane, a Charleston historian I'd met at a hospital seminar, attaching photos of my burns. His reply was urgent. "Meet me at Capitol Diner now." I drove through the fog, the river looming, my hand searing as the burns spread. At the diner, Elias, a gaunt man with tired eyes, looked grim, studying my arms. "Those are light marks," he said, voice low. "The electrician, Amos Holt, bound a spirit to his house's lights after a fraud ruined him. It targets liars, trapping them in sparks." He showed a 1965 journal from Charleston's archives. Residents vanishing, their skin burned with spark-like marks, lights glowing their names. "You must destroy the main bulb's filament," he urged, his hands trembling. I returned at dusk, the house looming, its windows black. At 6 hours 66 minutes a.m., the lights flared, the buzz deafening, the air thick with burnt metal and river mud. Shadows writhed in the glow, forming the child's face, her voice accusing. I smashed the ceiling bulb with a broom, my burn searing, the glass shattering to reveal a core of pulsing wires, like a heart in the house. A voice not mine roared, "Nora, confess." The house shook, floors buckling, walls cracking. I fled as the house dissolved into a fog that smelled of sparks and decay. In Lila's apartment, the burns faded, but my lamp flickered faintly, and my reflection sparked, its eyes accusing. The July dusk draped Frederick, Maryland, like a heavy veil, the air thick with the scent of honeysuckle, its sweetness cloying, and a faint, glassy reek, like mirrors left to bake in the sun. My house on Market Street, a narrow row house with creaking floors and chipped paint, stood silent under the city's amber glow, its windows glinting like eyes. The street was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic, its rhythm uneven, like a warning. I, Ethan Morse, 28, a coder with calloused fingers, was home alone for a week. My roommate, Ben, on a camping trip in the Catoctines. My career was collapsing after leaking a client's proprietary code to a competitor, losing contracts and my reputation. My apartment was a mess of laptops, tangled cables, and unpaid bills, each a mark of my betrayal. Redditor/Nosleep had threads about Frederick Holmes, where mirrors showed wrong eyes, whispering your crimes, and shadows stared with your face. My cousin, Ben, a pragmatic IT tech, had warned against staying alone, citing my nightmares. Waking at 7 hours, 77 minutes a.m., seeing eyes in the glass, not mine, staring back. I needed to finish a new project, but this house, with its creaking beams and shadowed corners, held something that stole my gaze. The bathroom was a dim chamber, lit by a single bulb that flickered like a dying ember, casting uneven shadows across the tiled walls, their grout black with age. The air was heavy, almost metallic, with that glassy scent, now laced with a sharp tang, like polished silver. The mirror, old and smudged, its frame warped, seemed to shimmer faintly, its glass etched with faint scratches, like pupils scratched out. I checked the door, locked, my paranoia fueled by those Reddit posts. My desk, cluttered with code printouts and coffee mugs, faced the hallway, the bathroom door visible. I worked, debugging code, but at 7 hours, 77 minutes a.m., a low hum echoed from the bathroom, like glass vibrating in a storm. The mirror showed my face, but the eyes were wrong, clouded, accusing, like my client's glare when he discovered my leak. I checked the lock, secure, yet the hum grew, rhythmic, like a pulse. My hand stung as I touched the glass, marked with faint, lens-like scars, their patterns mimicking cracked mirrors, as if the glass had branded me. A whisper in my own voice slithered from the mirror. "Ethan, you betrayed." My pulse surged, my breath shallow. The mirrors flared, reflecting my client's face, his eyes boring into mine. My phone died, its screen flashing a photo I didn't take. Me in the mirror, my eyes gone, my face twisting into his. I called for Ben, knowing he was gone, my voice swallowed by the house's silence. The air grew colder, the glassy scent choking, now mixed with a sour reek, like tarnished metal. My laptop was open, displaying code I didn't write, exposing my leak in glowing lines. On Reddit/Nosleep, a post titled "Frederick Mirror Eyes" by Glass Spectre described a Market Street house where mirrors stole gazes, trapping betrayers in their reflections. The house reflects it, they wrote, their account deleted. A Frederick blog mentioned a 1970s glassmaker betrayed by a traitor who stole his designs, who cursed his last house's mirrors to trap deceivers. Their sins reflected in the glass. The scars on my arms pulsed, forming words. Traitor. My phone flashed more photos, me, eyeless in glass, my body fracturing like a shattered mirror. The house seemed to breathe, the walls humming, the mirrors glinting in rhythm with my heartbeat. I emailed Dr. Mara Holt, a Frederick historian I'd met at a tech meetup, attaching photos of my scars. Her reply was urgent. "Meet me at Brewer's Alley now." I drove through the dusk, the city's lights blurred, my hand searing as the scars spread. At the diner, Mara, a stern woman with sharp eyes, looked grim, studying my arms. "Those are mirror marks," she said, voice low. The glassmaker, Elias Morse, bound a spirit to his house's mirrors after a traitor ruined him. It targets betrayers, trapping them in glass. She showed a 1975 journal from Frederick's archives. Residents vanishing, their skin scarred with lens-like marks, mirrors reflecting their eyes. "You must break the main mirror's glass," she urged, her hands trembling. I returned at dusk, the house looming, its windows black. At 7 hours 77 minutes a.m., the mirrors hummed, the sound deafening, the air thick with metal and glass. Shadows writhed in the glass, forming my client's face, his voice accusing. I swung a hammer at the bathroom mirror, my scars searing, the glass shattering to reveal a core of pulsing reflections, like liquid eyes. A voice not mine roared, "Ethan, confess." The house shook, floors buckling, walls cracking. I fled as the house dissolved into a fog that smelled of tarnish and decay. In Ben's apartment, the scars faded, but my glasses reflected clouded eyes, and my reflection stared, its lips moving with my name. The September rain lashed Augusta, Maine, like a relentless whip, the air heavy with the scent of the Kennebec River, its muddy tang rising, and a faint, earthy reek, like wood rotting beneath the boards of a forgotten ship. My house on State Street, a sagging Victorian with warped floors and cracked plaster, stood silent under the storm's weight, its windows rattling like teeth. The street was quiet, save for the steady drum of rain, its rhythm uneven, like a warning. I, Harper Lane, 27, a chef with flour-dusted hands, was home alone for a weekend. My partner, Mia, on a catering job in Portland. My restaurant was failing after serving spoiled seafood, sickening customers, and losing their trust. My kitchen was a mess of recipe cards, broken utensils, and unpaid bills, each a mark of my negligence. Redditzer/Nosleep had threads about Augusta homes, where floors creaked secrets, whispering your past, and shadows pulsed like roots. My sister, Mia, a skeptical baker, had warned against staying alone, citing my nightmares. Waking at 8 hours 88 minutes a.m., hearing creaks and my name echoing in the wood. I needed to plan a new menu, but this house, with its groaning beams and damp corners, held something that knew my carelessness. The kitchen was a dim hollow, lit by a single lamp that flickered like a failing pulse, casting uneven shadows across the tiled floor, its grout black with age. The air was heavy, almost gritty, with that earthy scent, now laced with a sour tang, like rotting roots. The floorboards, old and uneven, groaned faintly, their grain etched with faint scratches, like scars of past tenants. I checked the locks, secure, my paranoia fueled by those Reddit posts. My counter, cluttered with spices and notebooks, faced the main floor, its boards creaking softly. I worked, sketching recipes, but at 8 hours 88 minutes a.m., a sharp creak echoed, like footsteps circling beneath. The floor pulsed, boards forming my face, twisted with guilt, the grain outlining my customers' accusing eyes. I checked the back door locked, yet the creaks grew, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. My hand stung, marked with faint, grain-like scars, their patterns mimicking with splinters, as if the floor had branded me. A whisper in my own voice slithered from the boards. "Harper, you harmed." My pulse surged, my breath shallow. The floorboard shifted, forming my customers' faces, their mouths open in silent screams. My phone died, its screen flashing a photo I didn't take. Me on the floor, my body sinking into wood, my face fracturing like bark. I called for Mia, knowing she was gone, my voice swallowed by the house's silence. The air grew colder, the earthy scent choking, now mixed with a wet reek, like river mud. My recipe book was open, scrawled with my mistakes in my handwriting. Seafood, expired, served. On Redditzer/Nosleep, a post titled "Augusta Creaking Floors" by Woodwraith described a State Street house where floors trapped the careless, their boards whispering sins, the house swallowing those who lingered. "The house walks it," they wrote, their account deleted. An Augusta blog mentioned a 1940s carpenter, betrayed by a chef who stole his supplies, who cursed his last house's floors to trap the negligent, their sins carved into the wood. The scars on my arms pulsed, forming words. careless. My phone flashed more photos, me sinking into wood, my body splintering like bark. The house seemed to breathe, the walls creaking, the floors groaning in rhythm with my heartbeat. I emailed Dr. Lila Reed, an Augusta historian I'd met at a food festival, attaching photos of my scars. Her reply was urgent. Meet me at Slate's restaurant now. I drove through the rain, the river looming, my hands searing as the scars spread. At the restaurant, Lila, a stern woman with gray eyes, looked grim, studying my arms. Those are floor marks, she said, voice low. The carpenter Amos Lane bound a spirit to his house's floors after a chef ruined him. It targets the careless, trapping them in wood. She showed a 1947 journal from Augusta's archives. Residents vanishing, their skin scarred with grain-like marks, floors creaking their names. You must rip up the main board's grain, she urged, her hands trembling. I returned at dusk, the house looming, its windows black. At 8 hours 88 minutes a.m., the floors creaked, the sound deafening, the air thick with mud and rot. Shadows writhed in the boards, forming my customers' faces, their voices accusing. I pried up the kitchen board with a crowbar, my scars searing, the wood splintering to reveal a core of pulsing roots, like veins in a living thing. A voice not mine roared, "Harper, confess." The house shook, walls cracking, floors buckling. I fled as the house dissolved into a fog that smelled of river mud and decay. In Mia's kitchen, scars faded, but my floorboards creaked faintly, and my reflection sank into wood, its eyes accusing.